The rain hammered against the windshield of Marcus Chen's pickup truck as he navigated the winding mountain road. Beside him sat his triplet siblings, Elena and David, returning from their weekend camping trip in the Cascades. At 23, they had maintained their childhood tradition of annual adventures together, despite their increasingly different life paths. Marcus worked as a paramedic, Elena was finishing her residency at Seattle General, and David taught high school history. Visibility's getting worse, Elena observed from the passenger seat, her medical training making her naturally cautious. Maybe we should pull over until this storm passes. David, sprawled in the back seat with camping gear, was about to agree when they heard the screech of tires ahead. Through the rain-blurred windshield, they watched in horror as a silver sedan lost control on the slick asphalt, spinning twice before slamming into the guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. Marcus immediately pulled over, his emergency training kicking in. Elena, grab your medical bag from the back. David, call 911 and then help me with the scene. The triplets moved with practiced coordination, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. As they approached the wreckage, steam rose from the crumpled hood. The driver's side was crushed against the guardrail, but they could see movement inside. Marcus carefully approached the passenger side while Elena assessed the situation with clinical precision. The driver appeared to be a man in his 60s, conscious, but clearly injured, blood trickling from a head wound. "Sir, can you hear me?" Marcus called out, testing the door handle. It was jammed shut. "We're going to get you out of there." David had already called emergency services and was now helping Marcus try to pry open the door. The man inside turned his head slightly, his eyes unfocused but aware. He tried to speak, but only a whisper escaped his lips. Elena squeezed through the partially shattered rear window, her small frame allowing her to reach the victim. She quickly assessed his injuries, likely concussion, possible internal bleeding, but nothing immediately life-threatening if they could get him proper medical attention soon. "The ambulance is 20 minutes out because of the storm," David reported, his phone still pressed to his ear as he coordinated with dispatch. Working together, the triplets managed to stabilize the victim and carefully extract him from the vehicle just as the twisted metal began to groan ominously. They moved him to their truck, where Elena continued monitoring his vital signs while Marcus and David secured the accident scene. As they waited for professional help to arrive, the stranger drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling incoherently. None of them could have imagined that this random act of heroism would unravel a mystery that had shaped their entire lives. The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing through the storm, followed closely by a fire truck and police car. Marcus immediately began coordinating with the paramedic team, providing a detailed report of the victim's condition and the care they had administered. His colleagues respected his expertise, seamlessly integrating the Chun triplets into the emergency response. "Good work, Marcus," said Janet Rodriguez, the lead paramedic. "Your initial assessment probably saved his life. We've got it from here." Elena rode in the ambulance, continuing to monitor the patient's vital signs during the journey to Seattle General, ironically, the same hospital where she worked. The man, who appeared to be in his early 60s with graying hair and weathered hands, remained semi-conscious, occasionally muttering words that Elena couldn't quite understand over the sound of medical equipment and road noise. David followed in Marcus's truck, having given his statement to the police. As they drove through the storm toward the city, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about the accident scene had been oddly familiar, though he couldn't pinpoint what. At the hospital, Elena seamlessly transitioned from rescuer to medical professional, briefing the ER team on the patient's condition. Dr. Patricia Kim, the attending physician, took over the case while Elena stepped back to observe. Hospital policy prevented her from treating patients she had been personally involved with rescuing. John Doe, approximately 60 to 65 years old, involved in single-vehicle accident, Dr. Kim announced to the trauma team. Possible concussion, lacerations to the head and arms, potential internal injuries. Let's get a full workup. Marcus and David waited in the family area, still in their damp camping clothes. The adrenaline from the rescue was beginning to wear off, replaced by the familiar post-emergency exhaustion that Marcus knew well from his job. David graded papers he had brought along for the weekend, trying to distract himself from replaying the accident in his mind. Think he'll be okay? David asked, looking up from a particularly creative essay about the Civil War. Elena seemed confident. Marcus replied, though he had noticed the concern in his sister's eyes during the ambulance ride. Head injuries can be tricky, but he was responsive. That's a good sign. Elena emerged from the trauma bay an hour later, having changed into scrubs borrowed from a colleague. She approached her brothers with a puzzled expression that they recognized from childhood, the look she got when trying to solve a particularly challenging puzzle. He's stable, she reported, sitting down beside them. Mild concussion, some stitches, bruised ribs, but nothing life-threatening. Dr. Kim wants to keep him overnight for observation, which is standard protocol. That's good news, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. There's something else, Elena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. When they were cleaning his wounds, he kept mumbling the same word over and over. At first, I thought it was just confusion from the head injury, but it was so clear, so deliberate. What was he saying? David asked, setting aside his papers. Elena glanced around the busy ER, then leaned closer to her brothers. He was saying Catherine. Over and over again. Catherine, I'm sorry. Catherine, forgive me. The triplets exchanged glances. Catherine had been their mother's name. Sleep eluded the Chin triplets that night. Each lay in their respective beds, staring at ceilings and trying to rationalize the coincidence. Catherine was a common enough name, after all. Their mother had died in a car accident when they were only 5 years old, a tragedy that had left them to be raised by their maternal grandmother, Rose, who had passed away 3 years ago. Elena arrived at the hospital early the next morning, ostensibly to check on her patients, but really to look in on their mysterious accident victim. She found him awake, sitting up in bed, and looking remarkably better despite the bandages covering his head wound, and the bruises painting his arms purple and yellow. Good morning, she said, entering his room with a professional smile. I'm Dr. Elena Chen. I was one of the people who helped you yesterday. The man's eyes widened with recognition and something else, an emotion Elena couldn't quite identify. Fear? Surprise? Guilt? You saved my life, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. All 3 of you. I remember, triplets. There were 3 of you. My brothers Marcus and David were there too, Elena confirmed, pulling up a chair. How are you feeling? Do you remember what happened? The storm, losing control. He paused, studying Elena's face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. I'm sorry, it's just, you look so much like someone I used to know. Your eyes, the shape of your face. Elena felt her heart skip. The nurses said you don't have any identification. Can you tell me your name? The man hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the hospital blanket. James, he said finally. James Morrison. Mr. Morrison, is there someone we can call? Family members who might be worried about you. No, he answered quickly, too quickly. No family. I was just driving through. Elena made notes on his chart, but her instincts told her there was more to his story. You mentioned a name yesterday. Catherine. Is that someone important to you? James Morrison went completely still, the color draining from his face. For a moment, Elena thought he might faint. I don't remember saying that, he stammered, but his eyes betrayed him. Memory issues are common with concussions, Elena said gently, though she didn't believe his confusion was medical. It might come back to you gradually. After completing her medical assessment, Elena left James Morrison's room with more questions than answers. She found Marcus in the hospital cafeteria, where he was grabbing coffee before his shift started. How's our mystery man? Marcus asked, noting his sister's troubled expression. Physically, he's fine. But Marcus, there's something strange about him. When I mentioned the name Catherine, he went white as a sheet. And he keeps staring at me like he's seen a ghost. Marcus frowned. Maybe we should do some digging. David's good at research, all that historical training. Maybe he can find out more about this James Morrison. I already called him, Elena said. He's coming by after school with his laptop. But Marcus, what if this isn't just a coincidence? What if somehow this man knew Mom? The possibility hung between them like a storm cloud, bringing with it questions they weren't sure they wanted answered. David Chin spent his lunch break in the high school library, his laptop open to multiple browser tabs as he searched for information about James Morrison. As a history teacher, he had developed considerable skill in research, but finding details about their mysterious accident victim proved challenging. Morrison, James, yielded thousands of results, none clearly matching their man. David tried adding Seattle, Washington, approximate age, even variations of the name, but came up with nothing definitive. It was as if James Morrison barely existed in the digital world. After school, David met his siblings at the hospital, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder and a manila folder tucked under his arm. They found a quiet corner in the family waiting area, away from the bustle of the ER. "I couldn't find much," David reported, opening his laptop. "No social media presence, no obvious employment records, no recent addresses I could locate. Either our James Morrison is very private or James Morrison isn't his real name." Elena leaned forward, intrigued despite her exhaustion from a double shift. "What did you find?" "This is where it gets interesting," David said, pulling documents from his folder. "I went old school and checked some archived newspaper databases. Look at this." He spread out printed articles from the Seattle Times, dated 25 years ago. The headline read, "Local teacher dies in tragic car accident." "Mom," Marcus whispered, seeing Catherine Chen's photograph accompanying the obituary. "Read the details," David urged. "Look at the witness statements." Elena scanned the article, her medical training helping her process information quickly. "It says Mom's car went off the road during a rainstorm. She was pronounced dead at the scene." She paused, her finger tracing the text. "But look here, there was another vehicle involved. The other driver left the scene but came forward 3 days later." "James Morrison," Marcus read over her shoulder, his voice barely audible. The article continued. "Morrison, 32, told police he had been drinking and panicked after the collision. He claimed he tried to help but fled when he realized Chin was dead. Morrison was charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence." David pulled out another document. "Here's the court record. He pleaded guilty, served 18 months in prison, and had his license suspended for 5 years. After that, the trail goes cold." The triplets sat in stunned silence, the noise of the hospital fading around them. The man they had saved, the stranger they had pulled from a burning vehicle, was the person responsible for their mother's death. "He killed Mom," Elena said, her voice flat and emotionless in the way it got when she was processing trauma. "And we saved him," Marcus added, the irony not lost on any of them. David closed the laptop, his hands shaking slightly. "What do we do now? Do we confront him? Call the police?" "He served his time," Elena said, though her clinical detachment was beginning to crack. "What he did was 25 years ago. He paid his debt to society." "Did he?" Marcus asked. "We grew up without a mother because of him. Grandma Rose raised us when she should have been enjoying her retirement. Our whole lives were shaped by what he did that night." Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, another storm was building, dark clouds gathering over Seattle. "He knew," she realized aloud. "When he saw us, when I told him our names, he knew exactly who we were. That's why he looked so frightened." The weight of this revelation settled over them. Their act of mercy had not only saved a stranger's life, it had saved the life of the man who had destroyed their family. James Morrison was scheduled to be discharged the following morning, but Elena found herself standing outside his room at 6 a.m., wrestling with emotions she couldn't name. Anger, certainly. Confusion. But also something that might have been pity for the broken man who had spent 25 years carrying the weight of their mother's death. She knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Morrison was sitting on the edge of his bed, fully dressed in clothes someone had brought him, though the triplets couldn't imagine who, since he claimed to have no family. "Dr. Chun," he said, his voice resigned. "I wondered when you'd come." "You know who we are," Elena said, not bothering with pleasantries. Morrison nodded slowly, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "The moment I saw you, I knew. You have her eyes. All 3 of you do." Catherine's eyes. Elena felt her professional composure cracking. Don't you dare say her name. I've been saying her name every day for 25 years, Morrison replied quietly. In prayers, in apologies, in dreams where I beg her forgiveness. I know you probably can't believe this, but not a day has passed that I haven't thought about what I took from this world. What I took from you. Marcus and David appeared in the doorway, having followed their sister to the hospital despite agreeing they should wait. Elena was grateful for their presence. She felt unmoored, adrift in emotions she hadn't experienced since childhood. You ran, Marcus said, his paramedic training evident as he assessed Morrison's vital signs even while angry. You left her there and ran. I was drunk, terrified, and 25 years younger, Morrison said, looking at each triplet in turn. I was also a coward. I've spent every day since trying to become a better man, but nothing I do will bring her back or give you the mother you deserved. David, ever the researcher, pulled out his folder of documents. James Morrison. Vehicular manslaughter. Served 18 months of a 3-year sentence. I served the full 3 years, Morrison corrected gently. 18 months in prison, 18 months in a halfway house, and I've been on informal probation to myself ever since. I stopped drinking that night and never started again. I've spent the last 2 decades working with mothers against drunk driving, speaking at high schools, trying to prevent other young idiots from making the same choice I did. Elena sank into the visitor's chair, overwhelmed.
Why?
Why didn't you just leave town, change your name, start over somewhere else? Because running away didn't work the first time, Morrison said. You can't outrun guilt, Dr. Chin. I learned that the hard way. So I stayed in Seattle, stayed close to the scene of my crime, and tried to do better. Marcus crossed his arms, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. And now? What happens now that you know who saved your life? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the gray Seattle morning. Now I go home, and I add this to my list of things to feel grateful and guilty about. I owe you my life, but I can never repay what I took from yours. You're right, Elena said, standing abruptly. You can't. But as she left the room, she found herself wondering if forgiveness was something that could be earned, or if it was something that had to be given freely, and whether she was strong enough to do either. The Chin family home sat in the Fremont neighborhood, a modest 2-story house that had belonged to their grandmother Rose. After her death, the triplets had maintained it as a gathering place, keeping their childhood bedrooms intact and splitting the upkeep costs. It was here they retreated after the confrontation with Morrison, needing familiar surroundings to process what they had learned. Elena made tea while Marcus and David sat at the kitchen table where they had done homework for 13 years. The routine felt comforting, normal, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together on a Wednesday afternoon. I keep thinking about what Grandma Rose used to say, David said, accepting a steaming mug from his sister. About Mom's accident, I mean. She always said there were details that didn't make sense, things the police never fully explained. Marcus frowned, trying to recall conversations from their teenage years. Like what? The timeline, for one thing. Mom left the school, where she taught, at 4 p.m. that day. The accident happened at 8:30 p.m. That's 4.5 hours to make a drive that should have taken 40 minutes. Elena sat down, her analytical mind engaged despite her emotional exhaustion. Maybe she stopped somewhere, ran errands, met someone. But where? David asked, pulling out a notebook where he had been jotting down questions. I've been thinking about this all day. Mom was responsible, punctual. If she was going to be that late, she would have called Grandma Rose. She would have called us. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a habit from childhood when he was thinking hard. What else did Grandma say? She said Mom seemed different in the weeks before the accident. Distracted, worried about something. And there was a phone call the night before. Someone called asking for Mom, but when Grandma said she wasn't available, they hung up without leaving a message. Elena set down her mug, a memory surfacing. I remember that call. It woke me up. Grandma seemed upset afterward, but when I asked her about it the next morning, she just said it was a wrong number. What if it wasn't? David asked. What if Mom was meeting someone that night? What if the accident wasn't just a random collision during a storm? The implications hung heavy in the air. Their mother's death, which they had always understood as a tragic accident caused by Morrison's drunk driving, might be more complicated than they had been told. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked their mother's garden, now maintained by Elena with the same care Catherine had shown. "We need to talk to Morrison again. If he was there, if he saw what happened, maybe there are details he never told the police." "He's probably already left the hospital," Elena said. "Then we find him," David replied, his teacher's determination evident. "This is our mother we're talking about. Don't we deserve to know the whole truth?" Elena looked around the kitchen, at the refrigerator still decorated with report cards from their elementary school years, at the growth chart penciled on the door frame, at the family photos that stopped when they were 5 years old. Their mother smiled at them from every picture, frozen in time at 32, younger than they were now. "Yes," she said finally. "We do deserve the truth." Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change everything they thought they knew about their mother's final day. Finding James Morrison proved easier than expected. David's research skills, combined with Elena's hospital connections and Marcus's knowledge of Seattle's social services network, led them to a small apartment complex in the Capitol Hill district. Morrison lived in a studio unit on the 3rd floor, sparse but clean, with windows overlooking a community garden. The building's manager, a chatty woman named Mrs. Kowalski, was happy to provide information once Elena mentioned they were the people who had rescued Morrison from his car accident. "Oh, James is such a quiet tenant," she said, leading them up the stairs. "Pays his rent on time, keeps to himself. He works part-time at the community center down the street, counseling people with substance abuse problems. Been doing it for years." She knocked on Morrison's door. "James, there are some people here to see you. The ones who saved your life." Morrison opened the door cautiously, unsurprised but wary. He had changed out of his hospital clothes into jeans and a worn flannel shirt that made him look older, more fragile than he had in the sterile hospital environment. "Mr. Morrison," Elena said, taking the lead. "We need to talk to you about the night our mother died. The whole truth this time." Morrison's shoulders sagged as if he had been carrying a weight and finally had permission to set it down. "Come in," he said quietly. "I've been expecting this conversation for 25 years." The apartment was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with a small table, 2 chairs, and a sofa bed. What struck the triplets were the photographs covering one wall, dozens of pictures of their mother at various ages, some they recognized from their grandmother's collection, others they had never seen. Elena gasped, moving closer to examine the photos. "Where did you get these?" "Catherine gave them to me," Morrison said, gesturing for them to sit. "Over the 6 months we were seeing each other." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus was the first to find his voice. "Seeing each other? You mean dating?" Morrison nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. "We met at a teachers' conference in Vancouver. I was working for the district office then, and she was presenting a workshop on innovative reading programs. We started corresponding, then meeting for coffee. Then, you were having an affair with our mother?" David asked, his voice tight with shock. "No," Morrison said quickly. "Catherine was single, had been since your father died when you were babies. I was the one who was married. Unhappily, destructively married, but married nonetheless." Elena sank onto the sofa, trying to reconcile this information with her memories of their mother. Catherine Chen had been devoted to her children, her students, her community. The idea that she had been involved with a married man seemed impossible. "She ended it," Morrison continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 2 weeks before the accident. Said she couldn't be with someone who wasn't free to be with her completely. She deserved better than stolen moments and lies. Marcus leaned forward, his paramedic instincts kicking in as he noticed Morrison's hands shaking. "Is that why she was driving that night?" "To see you." "I had been calling her, begging her to reconsider. She finally agreed to meet me one last time, to talk things through. We met at a diner halfway between Seattle and where I was living then." Morrison's voice broke slightly. "She told me she couldn't do it anymore. That you three deserved a mother who wasn't living a lie. David's researcher mind was already putting pieces together. The 4.5 hours. She was with you. We talked for 3 hours. She was so strong, so certain about what she needed to do. She said she was going to focus on being the best mother she could be, that maybe someday when I got my life sorted out. Morrison wiped his eyes with the back of his hand.
But there was no someday.
I followed her when she left, still trying to change her mind. I was drunk, angry, desperate. When the storm hit and visibility got bad, I should have backed off, given her space. Instead, I was tailgating her, flashing my lights, being an ass. Elena felt sick. You caused the accident. When she took that curve, she was looking in her rearview mirror at me instead of watching the road. She overcorrected, and when I tried to avoid hitting her, I clipped her rear bumper. She spun out and went over the embankment. Morrison's voice was hollow, recounting the worst moments of his life. I did try to help her. I climbed down to her car, but she was already gone. And I panicked just like I told the police. But I never told them why she was out there that night. Never told them about us. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain beginning to fall outside, echoing the storm that had changed all their lives 25 years ago. The triplets left Morrison's apartment in stunned silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they walked through the Capitol Hill neighborhood. The rain that had threatened all day finally began to fall in earnest, soaking through their clothes and adding to the sense of disorientation that had settled over them. They found refuge in a small coffee shop, sliding into a corner booth where they could talk privately. Elena stared into her untouched latte, while Marcus methodically shredded napkins and David filled pages in his notebook with questions and observations. So Mom was having an affair, Elena said finally, her voice flat. She wasn't married, David pointed out, though his defense sounded weak even to him. Technically, she wasn't the one having an affair. But she was dating a married man, Marcus replied. Which means she was keeping secrets from Grandma Rose, from us, from everyone. Elena looked up from her coffee, her eyes rimmed with tears she refused to shed. Does it change anything? Does knowing this make what happened better or worse? It makes it more complicated, David said, setting down his pen. All these years, we thought she died because some drunk idiot made a terrible decision. Now we know she died because she was trying to end a relationship with that drunk idiot who couldn't accept her decision. Marcus leaned back against the booth, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I keep thinking about Morrison's apartment. All those photos. He's been carrying this guilt for 25 years, but he's also been carrying his love for her. Don't romanticize this, Elena snapped. He killed her. Whether it was a random accident or the result of their relationship, he still killed her. I'm not romanticizing anything, Marcus replied gently. I'm just trying to understand the whole picture. Mom was human. She made choices, had feelings, lived a life we knew nothing about. David closed his notebook, having filled several pages with fragmented thoughts and unanswered questions. What do we do with this information? Do we tell anyone? Do we confront Morrison again? What's the point? Elena asked. Mom's still dead. We still grew up without her. Morrison still chose to drink and drive that night. The details don't change the outcome. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the rain against the windows and the quiet conversations of other customers. Finally, Marcus spoke. I think it changes things for me, he said slowly. Not the fact that she's gone, but understanding why she was out there that night. She wasn't just driving home from work. She was trying to do the right thing, trying to end something that was causing her conflict. She was trying to be a better person, David added, even if it meant giving up something that might have made her happy. Elena considered this, her analytical mind working through the implications. So she died because she was trying to prioritize us. Because she wanted to be the mother she thought we deserved. The irony was almost too much to bear. Their mother had died because she was trying to be a better mother to them. Morrison said she talked about us that night. David remembered. Said she wanted to focus on being the best mother she could be. Elena finally took a sip of her coffee, though it had long since grown cold. I hate that I understand her better now. I hate that knowing about Morrison makes me miss her differently. Different how? Marcus asked. Before, I missed the mother I remembered, the one who read us bedtime stories and made pancakes on Saturday mornings. Now I miss the woman I never got to know, the one who fell in love with the wrong person and had the strength to walk away. Outside, the storm was intensifying, and Elena couldn't help but think that their mother had died in weather just like this, torn between love and duty, trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. 3 days later, Elena was finishing her shift at Seattle General when she received an unexpected call. James Morrison was back in the emergency room, this time not as a patient but as a visitor. He was asking to speak with her, and according to the nurse who called, he seemed agitated but not hostile. Elena found him in the family waiting area, holding a worn manila envelope and looking like he hadn't slept since their conversation at his apartment. She approached cautiously, still processing her conflicted feelings about the man who had shaped their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. "Mr. Morrison," she said, taking the seat across from him. "What can I do for you?" "I have something that belongs to you," he said, holding out the envelope. "All three of you. I should have given these to you years ago, but I was selfish. I wanted to keep them, to hold on to the last pieces of her." Elena accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in her mother's familiar handwriting. Her name was on the return address, but they were addressed to Morrison at various locations over the months they had known each other. "I kept everything," Morrison said quietly. "Every letter, every card, every note she ever wrote to me. I thought someday I might have the courage to show them to you, to help you understand who she really was." Elena pulled out the first letter, dated 7 months before the accident. The handwriting was unmistakably their mother's, but the voice was one Elena had never heard, romantic, hopeful, conflicted. "There are 43 letters," Morrison said. "In the last few, she talks about you three constantly, about how much she loved you, how guilty she felt about the time she was spending away from you, how she was trying to figure out how to be true to herself while still being the mother you deserved." Elena looked up from the letter, seeing Morrison through new eyes. "Why are you giving these to me now?" "Because you saved my life," he said simply. "Because I realized that holding on to these letters wasn't honoring Catherine's memory, it was holding her hostage to my guilt. She wrote them to me, but the love she describes in them belongs to all of you." Elena carefully returned the letter to the envelope, overwhelmed by the weight of her mother's private thoughts. "I need to share these with my brothers." "Of course," Morrison agreed. "There's one more thing." He pulled a smaller envelope from his pocket. "She wrote this the night before she died. It's addressed to all three of you. I found it in her car after the accident, but I couldn't." Elena's hands shook as she took the final letter. The envelope was sealed, their names written on the front in their mother's careful script. "For Elena, Marcus, and David, my greatest loves, my greatest gifts." "She was going to give this to you the next day," Morrison said, tears flowing freely now. "She had made her decision. She was going to tell you everything about us, about the mistakes she had made, about how much she loved you." Elena stood abruptly, the letters clutched against her chest. "I have to go. Dr. Chen," Morrison called as she reached the door. For what it's worth, she was so proud of who you were becoming. Even at 5 years old, she could see the doctors, the teacher, the hero you would grow up to be. She said you three were her proof that she had done something right in this world. Elena paused, looking back at the broken man who had carried their mother's secrets for 25 years. "Mr. Morrison?" "Yes. Thank you." As she left the hospital, Elena realized that forgiveness might not be something dramatic or definitive. Maybe it was something quiet and gradual, like understanding that broken people could still do good things, that enemies could become teachers, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones carrying the heaviest burdens themselves. The Chen triplets sat around their grandmother's kitchen table once more, but this time the atmosphere was different. Between them lay 44 letters spanning their mother's relationship with James Morrison, each one revealing new facets of the woman they had idealized and mourned for 25 years. They had spent the evening reading chronologically through their mother's correspondence, watching her fall in love, struggle with the moral implications of dating a married man, and ultimately choose her children over her own happiness. The final letter, addressed to all three of them, lay unopened. They had decided to read it together. "Are you ready?" Elena asked, her fingers poised to break the seal that had remained intact for a quarter of a century. Marcus and David nodded, and Elena carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in their mother's handwriting, dated the day before her death. Elena read aloud. "My dearest Elena, Marcus, and David, if you are reading this, it means I found the courage to tell you about the mistakes I have made and the difficult choices I face. By now you know about James and the relationship I should never have begun. I hope you can understand that adults sometimes make poor decisions while searching for happiness, but that those decisions don't diminish the love they have for their children. I want you to know that ending things with James isn't a sacrifice, it's a privilege. Being your mother is the greatest gift I have ever received, and I refuse to compromise that gift for anything or anyone. You three are my heart walking around outside my body, and every choice I make from now on will be made with your best interests as my guide. Elena, my serious little scientist, never stop asking questions about the world. Your curiosity will take you places I can't even imagine. Marcus, my gentle protector, your instinct to help others will be your superpower. Use it to make the world safer for people who need someone strong in their corner. David, my thoughtful storyteller, your love of learning and teaching will help you understand that every person has a story worth hearing, even